Anyway, this is Bible Q&A. And the question, once again, I'll say it for the video people, is how come the Bible says so much about helping the poor, but Jesus said that the poor will always be with us? Does that mean we shouldn't even try? Should we not try to help? All right, well, let's dig into the passages where Jesus says this. All right. Here in Matthew, starting in chapter 26, verse 6, Jesus was in the town of Bethany, eating at the home of Simon, who had leprosy. A woman came in with a bottle of expensive perfume and poured it on Jesus' head. But when his disciples saw this, they became angry and complained, "Why such a waste? We could have sold this perfume for a lot of money and given it to the poor." But Jesus knew what they were thinking, and he said, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing for me. And you will always have the poor with you, but you won't always have me. She has poured perfume on my body to prepare it for burial. You may be sure that wherever the good news is told all over the world, people will remember what she has done, and they will tell others." Now let's look at what Mark says. Mark says essentially the same thing. Jesus is eating in Bethany at the home of Simon, who once had leprosy. Woman comes in with expensive bottle of perfume, pours it on Jesus' head. This makes the guests angry, though, not the disciples now, the guests. So you see, apparently this just made everybody mad. Not just the disciples, but the guests too. And they complained, "Why such a waste?" Here it names the actual price. "We could have sold this perfume for more than 300 silver coins and given the money to the poor." This was no cheap bottle of perfume, okay? This wasn't like Walmart perfume. This was Hollister cologne, okay? This was like New York company. This was like Armani perfume. and you know, so they started to say cruel things to the woman. And then Jesus responds, same as before, "Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her?" And everything pretty much is the same there. You will always have the poor with you. And whenever you want to, you can give to them, but you won't always have me here with you. Both times Jesus says, the poor will always be with you, and you can always serve them, but I won't always be here with you. I won't always be here with you. See, the key to understanding this is right there, because Jesus is making a comparison here. What Jesus is saying is the poor are going to be here after I'm gone, but I'm leaving, and I'm leaving soon. And ironically, Jesus was actually pointing this out because the disciples just weren't getting it. And I honestly think that Jesus was probably pretty amazed that some woman understood it. And I don't mean that in a sexist manner. I mean it just like this person who isn't even technically like a disciple, not an apostle, understands the fact that Jesus is going to the cross and the disciples don't. And he sees the irony of the disciples getting all worked up about this when really she's the one who's doing the completely appropriate thing, preparing a body for burial, as he puts it. And the disciples never really caught on to that fact either. I mean, they struggled with it a lot, obviously. The idea that Jesus was going to go to the cross and die. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And if you're wondering, you should ask. And I'll answer it later. Spoilers and teasers anyway. So does this mean we shouldn't help the poor because the poor are always with us? I think we need to understand that Jesus was speaking in a manner. I think Jesus was trying to make a point with what he was saying. He was saying that the poor would still be there after he was gone, and that he was not going to be there much longer. He was trying to give the disciples and the dinner guests some perspective on what was taking place and why he was defending this woman. So let's look at it practically. Have the poor always been with us? Well, yes, they have. In fact, the poor were with them back when they were wandering around in the desert. In all those crazy law books, all the Old Testament law, there are plenty of passages that dictate certain behaviors that are to be practiced by the Israelites, certain customs and practices, and the way that they're supposed to treat poor people. One of the things that's really interesting, and it's actually mentioned in the book of Ruth, is that they weren't supposed to harvest all the crop in their field. Instead, they were supposed to leave the edges so that the poor could come and take that, and then they would have something to eat. And it was actually against the Old Testament law to collect all the crop in your field. You needed to leave the edges. That was something that God put in there, because God didn't trust humanity to be compassionate enough to take care of the poor. So he made a law saying that we had to. He's not so bad. And it's still the same today. The poor will always be there. And you know why the poor will be there? Because it's the same thing as saying, like, the rich will always be there. The sun will always come up. You know? Innocent people will always go to jail. Guilty people will always walk free. This world is not a fair place. It's not. I mean, turn on the news. I got this thing on my glasses. It's driving me crazy right now. There we go. It's not a fair place. And because of that, we can always expect to have the poor among us. And there's always going to be those instances where someone who's living life and things are going well for them financially, suddenly a series of unfortunate events occurs and they hit rock bottom. You know, maybe they have to go to the hospital. Maybe a family member dies and they have to pay for the costs, and that gets expensive. Or, you know, maybe there's an accident and they get sued and they're held responsible. There's all sorts of things that can happen that can drive someone into poverty. Maybe they went and they fought in a war and they came back and they didn't have the support structure that they needed to be able to function in society, and they found themselves without a job and without a home. And they're always going to be there. But you know what? That doesn't change anything, because we're called to love the poor. We're called to help them, and we're called to give to them. The Bible does talk about it a lot, and the question asker nailed that on the head. So what we need to remember when we're looking at these passages with this is Jesus is saying that helping the poor is still incredibly important. He was just trying to give the disciples some perspective on what was going on. Or, to put it in different words, Jesus was explaining to the disciples why the use of this very expensive perfume was going to be permitted by him to take place. Either way, it's no excuse not to help the poor. All right? It's no excuse. It's part of our calling, and it's part of how we share the gospel. So, that's that. Anyway, hopefully that answers the question well. Keeps everything straight for everybody. This has been Bible Q&A. And as I said before, if you have any questions, you can drop them at a new part of our website, the questions page. remedylive.com/questions is where you can go to ask questions for a whole bunch of shows: Relationship Status, Gong Show, and Bible Q&A. Just select the show that you want to send the question to, and then just write in the box and hit send. It's that easy. Let's get back to some more music, because music is what makes the world go round. Imagine Dragons is on now with Radioactive right here on Remedy Live. We chat, we listen, and we love.